Hello, everyone. I'm Anumani, your modern day shaman and the author of Unmasking Your Soul, a transformational journey of truth, light, and healing. And today I have a special guest, Dina Tibbs. Welcome, Dina. It's wonderful to have you.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here. I feel so honored that you invited me to join you today. Thank you.
You are so welcome. I'm so happy to have you on. And before we get started with the questions, I'm going to read your bio to everyone. So Dina is the founder and inspiratrix, I love that, at Amused Woman Studios in Centennial, Colorado. She believes women are on this planet to create, and that creativity and connection are the fastest ways to access the contents of our souls and inner wisdom. When we don't take time for creativity and spaciousness, we lose the connection to our deepest selves. We lose trust in our wisdom and our own information. Dina is the inspiratrix that guides women towards reestablishing that connection and trusting their own wisdom to themselves and each other. She does that through intentional creativity processes, 20 years of healing and spiritual arts training and energetic techniques designed to bring women into alignment with themselves and nature. She's also a women's sacred circle holder. She loves bringing women together in community, watching them step into the unknown, of being in sacred space with women and to know that they are not alone. She loves watching a woman transform right before her eyes. She loves watching a woman who says she is not creative paint a sacred version of herself and hear her say, wow, I never knew I could do this. Because if it's true for painting, it means she could do things she never knew she could do in all areas of her life. You can learn more about Dina and find her online and in-person offerings at www.amusedwomanstudios.com. And we will be putting all of your information under the video after we finish today's segment. So welcome, Dina. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Excited.
So I always like to start everyone with the same question around soul, since this is about unmasking the soul and what your experience of soul is or has been throughout your journey.
It's been a long one. My experience of soul is, it's this essence that's just even hard to put words around, really, but it's this pure divine love energy that is just, I feel like we come from stardust and we return to stardust, and the soul just comes in here with an assignment and chooses the body, chooses the mind, and puts us into these experiences as being humans, and is there for us to just constantly create our story and realize that we're a part of a large story, but that we're the authors and artists of our own stories. And, you know, the soul is just constantly here in our being, reminding us of who we are, even though the stories and the experiences sometimes tend to lead us towards forgetting. The soul is just always there to, if we listen and open up, to just pull us back in. It's, you know, to me, it is the all. We are the all. Everything is in a co-creation. We just have to remember that we're all part of the field in this quantum space. And soul is just, you know, it's timelessness and spacelessness. It's without matter and form. So that's kind of my deep quantum description of soul.
I love that. And you have some beautiful paintings behind you, which I'm sure we'll get to in a second, but you remind me of, in my book, I talk about the canvas of the soul and how soul kind of comes and wants to guide us and inspire us to paint that canvas of our life. And I know you've had an amazing journey and you always weren't where you are today. So can you tell us more about your journey of unmasking and potentially some of the masks that you had to let go of to become more of who you are today?
Yeah, it's, you know, we've all had these long journeys. I mean, I guess I'll probably start with a little bit about the painting, in that, you know, I've always thought I was a creative thinker, you know, and a creative being, but never an artist. And there were some external stories around that from childhood. And so I didn't even really bother trying to do art for many, many years until about 4 or 5 years ago, when I really picked up a paintbrush for the first time, because it was something my heart and soul decided to tell me I needed to to go do and learn. But that's kind of the end of the beginning. You know, I didn't have a lot of spiritual practice in my upbringing, and for a long time I kind of resented that. But now as an adult, I'm like, oh yay, I didn't have any stories. I didn't have any dogma. I got to really find my own path and just run with whatever resonated with me at the time and delve into all the wisdom teachings that are out there till I found really what all aligned and fit with me and in my place. And, you know, I've been through the corporate world. I've been through childhood and upbringing that we've all been through. I've been into the healing arts for 20 years. And so it's just all been this sort of snowball that has come around. But I think, you know, one of the masks that really was the difficult one, still is sometimes, I call it my wild child mask. You know, as I think in my upbringing, I took on the wild child because I wanted to dumb myself down. I didn't want to be seen as the smart kid because smart kids weren't cool at the time. So a lot of that was just a way for me to be accepted, be loved, you know, get attention. And it, you know, over the years turned into some real self-destructive behavior. So what I've struggled with over the years is how do I still get to be that wild woman and leave all the self-sabotaging behavior behind? And I think, you know, at this point I've achieved that, but that's probably the mask that I love and hate at the same time, right? Because it gives me the strength and the courage to march to the beat of my own drum. But at the same time, there was that shadow side that always said in order to look like that wild child, you had to do some things that weren't really in your integrity.
Yeah, and I can, you know, relate to that. I think we all have parts of ourselves that sometimes we try to suppress. And it's funny, nobody's talked about this particular mask, so this is awesome. But one that kind of relates to me is kind of this rebellious part of me. And, you know, rebellion can have a good and a shadow side as well. It could inspire you to do good things in the world, to bring more justice, but it also can inspire you to do things that are not in your favor. And I did some of those. So I completely relate to what you're saying of that, the positive and the shadow side of some of these masks that we tend to wear throughout our life. So what was there a pivotal moment where you just said, oh my God, I really got to work on this, or something happened that caused you to begin to shift into more of your authentic self?
I think, well, there's a couple of masks around that whole pivotal moment, but the wild child one in particular, I think shifted when my husband and I decided it was time that we wanted a child. So that was that was the big piece of it. But then I went through another really dark period after having my son. When he went off to school, my husband was working and traveling a lot, and I was back to, oh, who the hell am I now? The mother mask in its form at the time was changing and shifting. I had some healer stuff going on underneath that because I moved out of the corporate world into the healing arts, but something wasn't quite sitting right with me. So I went into a really deep, dark time that I pulled myself out of around, I think I want to say 2012. But the pivot story really that brought me here where I am right now was in 2016. When my husband and I moved to a bigger home so I could have my healing arts studio there. It had its own separate space. And right before we moved, he had an accident, a skiing accident, and broke his femur, which in the end took about 18 months to heal. But in that summer, I went through a very intense period of anxiety. I mean, intense, like couldn't leave the house. In panic mode, like just that embodied feeling of panic all the time. I mean, all the time, from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to sleep. And I met some wisdom teachers at the time. One in particular that I began to work with, you know, it was one of those situations. I knew all the herbs, I knew all the body work, I knew all the meditation practices, and none of it was helping the situation at all. And what really came out of all of that was the fact that healer, the assignment I thought my soul was for almost 20 years, was not it at all. I woke up one day and said, wow, no, that's not what I want to do, with the help of one of my mentors. And it really, what came out was the inspire was really more of the assignment. And so that healer mask was kind of an egoic mask that I was wearing, even though I would tell people, I'm not healing you, I'm just the conduit, you're healing yourself. But what I came to find out was, and as much as I love massage and I love herbs and I love all these things, they're supportive for the terrain, but they're still external.
Yeah.
And so through my own pivot at that point in time where I knew all that stuff to do, but what I wasn't doing was my deep inner work. And what I wasn't doing was going down to the underworld to unearth some stories, and bring some pieces of myself back into alignment that I had let go of while I was doing all that healing arts work.
Wow, that's powerful, because all of us on the spiritual journey, the ego will come in, and sometimes we don't realize we're wearing a mask, right? Or we're attached to something, and we need to let it go in order to evolve and grow into where our soul's trying to take us. And I remember that happening to me as well, where I was attached to the form of the way the healing was coming through me, and they were like, no, 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 you got to let that go, because we evolve even in the way we are serving, right? We evolve in the way that our soul is having us, and we have to let go of some attachments to form. So that's really great that you're talking about that. And I know that you use art as your own creative process, which is really awesome. Can you talk a little bit about you have some paintings behind you and your creative process that you use for yourself and for other women,
yeah,
trying to transform their lives?
Well, the process I specifically am trained to teach is called intentional creativity. It was founded by Shiloh Sophia, and really, it's a divine process. The painting part, the creative part, is a container, really, for us to be able to move those soul stories and unearth what our soul is ready to speak, and bring it into form. And once we bring it into form and look at it as an observer, we can begin to transform those stories, after first honoring and acknowledging them for what they are and the gifts that they have brought to us. So in this process, really it's intentional, underneath the layers of all these paintings, what you see in the final is not what was underneath all that. Sometimes in the muck and the mire, like the process that's behind me right now is a new one Shiloh and her husband are teaching called Apothecary. So it's really bringing tragedies into remedies. So some real composting and turning those stories into literal medicine for ourselves and for others. And, this idea, and you read it in my bio, that our souls come here, we are creative beings. That's what humans are, and that's what the divine, I believe, hopes for us all to be. And we tend to get ourselves away from that, or we speak the story of, oh, I don't have a creative bone in my body. And I tell women, no, our very bones are the creative piece. I mean, no matter how that comes out, whether it's painting or writing or music, really, it's to me the quickest way to get out of your own way and out of your head, and really just stop and listen to what the soul has to say. And for a person like myself, who's very active, not super quiet, a lot of movement, meditation can be very difficult for me. But when I go into this process, it's like, boom, I'm dropped in. And hours go by and there's very little interruption. And, you just, no attachment to outcome, and whatever comes out, comes out. And then sometimes, there's points in the process where the inner critic does start speaking, and you learn to work with her, or send her away, to do some other job. But it's a pivotal part of the process, because that's when the stories start going, and you learn to quiet them.
Yeah, and you sent me a picture where you're painting, and I could just feel the your connection to what you were doing and just the mindfulness. So is there a process you use to get into that zone, or are you at the point where you just automatically your body just goes into that space?
I do, if I'm teaching a group, we always connect in circle. If I'm working by myself, there's always, a ritual. I usually call in my elements and my spirit guides to be there with me, depending on the intent of the painting or the theme itself that I'm working with. There's usually, guided visualization that goes along with it, and sort of what we call the imaginary screen. But then once some layers of paint are down on the canvas, we use the canvas as the portal for the next set of visualization. So stop at different points in the process and go back in and see what's changed throughout. And, even doing like a very sort of open-eyed but gentle-eyed look, and using that canvas as the way in to the portal, to the next set of messages that you're ready to receive.
So now you've opened your center and you're working with various women. And I think you mentioned to me that a lot of the women you work with are moms and, people looking to transform their lives. So are there any common themes that you've been seeing in the area where you're doing the work?
Yeah, I think the common theme, particularly in this area where I physically am, are the women are hearing these whisperings of their soul, and they're not quite sure yet what to do with the information. And they're all, the words being used that by most women I sit in circle with are, "I just want to remember." Like literally those exact words come out of many of their mouths. They're not sure what just yet. And, this remembrance and asking for this ability and these techniques to teach them how to trust, to regain that connection to their own intuition, and begin to shed those external stories of who they should be and how they should behave, and what goals and visions they set for their own lives, coming from what they see externally versus what their heart and soul desires and their own intuition is telling them. So it's just a process of remembering and listening. Our soul sends us so many signals through the body mostly. And so listening to those clues that the body's giving us, which when I was going through my period of deep anxiety, it really took, it was my body telling me for 2 months before I really started to listen to it. Like, wow, there's nothing physical wrong with me here. It's my body physically telling me, though, that there's something deeply out of integrity here.
Yeah, and I talk about that a lot too, because we do tend to ignore our bodies. And I remember when I was being prepared to have my dream of awakening, I was having fainting spells, and the doctors couldn't find anything, and it was just all the chaos and turmoil inside. And I just had been ignoring it all, right? It took my body to create that, to get my attention, like, ooh, there's something really wrong inside. Are there particular things that you've noticed with the women you're working with that maybe have been shadows for them through their life or hard to let go of?
They're all a little bit different, but I think these different external expectations of what we should look like as mothers, like this idea that, I'll keep going. We're coming up on Mother's Day. I'll probably be doing a ritual around with some partners around remembering who we are. There's this societal norm that we're supposed to forget everything about ourselves while we're caregiving.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest thing, and the big shifts I see, because I went through this, so I teach on this a lot, is the level of responsibilities that we often create for ourselves, especially if our core strategy from our upbringing is as a controller, that we need to control our environments in order to feel safe. And often what that turns into is taking on responsibilities or perfection mode that really no one else is asking of us necessarily, or that as our children get older or our responsibilities even in the work world start to shift, that we don't change our level of responsibility around that. So like it took me a while to figure out my level of mothering responsibility is not the same with my son at 12 as when he was 3.
Yeah.
Or even my relationship to time, and how much time I had in a day, or when my day ended because my son came home from school. Well, my day doesn't end at that point. It did at one time, pretty much, but it's no longer like that. So what I really see is the awakening of women starting to shift their levels of responsibility, and their own ideas of what they're responsible for, and not holding it all.
Yeah. And what excites you most about the work you're doing now? Getting to this place where you did all this other stuff before and you worked in corporate and then moved into this space, which is, so different, and really trusting and surrendering to that.
It is. It's an exercise in trust, surrender, patience, all of it. But the deep desire comes back to, for me, and because of my analytical side and my corporate work, I have to say I love technology. I was just having a conversation with a healer about this, and that was a part of me I actually ignored for a while. So I had to bring right, left brain back into play for me, and I do love it. But I think the biggest thing we're all deeply craving again is to go back. It takes a village. So, to go back to these in-person deep connections is what excites me, I think, more than anything else. I mean, I tell people my own personal why for opening this studio is because I was tired of being lonely and being in isolation. I am not the archetype of the hermit artist at all. I'm very much a social being. And, I love witnessing story. And I love for the stories to come out into the field, because once we speak them, we can shift them. And then once we bring them into form, we can really transform them. It's like that different, levels of transformation in our stories. So.
And I love that, because I think people are really craving community, and especially women. I also have a lot of women clients, and I hear many times like them not having communities that they can go to really be themselves and connect at a soul level the way you're describing. So I'm so happy that you said yes to your soul's calling to doing this work. And so if you were to, the people who are listening to us who may be thinking that they're not an artist, and it's funny, I was talking to someone yesterday. I was doing a soul reading for them, and I was being told that they should use art as a way of meditation, and you spoke about that. So what advice would you give to people out there listening who perhaps want to maybe use some sort of creative process to begin unmasking and transforming their lives? What advice would you give them? Where do they start?
God, it's definitely one of those things. One of the quotes from Shiloh is, my teachers were rescuing creativity from the tyranny of the talented. It's not, first of all, you have to let go of going into it like anyone has to see it, because no one does. You can choose to display it, but no one else has to see it. You're not going into it to show in a gallery. It's an internal process. Again, thank Goddess for technology, because that's how I learned. I just decided one day I want to do this, and I, went to the Google Oracle and started searching, and I found teachers. Drawing a face can be taught, and initially it can be, you pull out a ruler, but I encourage people to sort of let go of that, because it's perfection mode tends to take over. But oftentimes it's difficult to stare at a blank piece of paper or a blank canvas. So often we just start with writing an intention. And then just throwing color down in any way, shape, or form, and just doing it as an act of play, because that was the other big thing, you know, in my childhood. I was always the adult. I mean, that part of that was just me. That was my soul coming into this space the way it is. And I have to play, and this is how I play. You know, another great thing is I love symbols. So, you know, researching different symbols that speak to you and just start putting them in your journal and coloring them. You can use crayons. It doesn't have to be any big thing. Watercolor pencils are like my favorite magical tool because they're easy to control and draw with, but then you put a brush in water and it becomes paint. Collage. I mean, a lot of people love collage art. All you need are magazines and glue. So, you know, there are just so many ways to access that part of you. And it really becomes a convergence of you know, they're not using left and right brain as much anymore in language. They're starting to use convergent and divergent thinking and how ideas come into play. And when we get out of our heads and get into creative practice, we actually find out that by the end of it, we've been informed about all sorts of stuff in our lives. So I use creative practice a lot in the business arena as well. You know, I teach people to do a creative business plan before they go and do the nuts and bolts of numbers and all the other stuff. Because for some, the numbers in the business planning piece is the scary part. Right. And the creativity piece is the easier part. And then I have people who are just, you know, the opposite. But, you know, I'll tell people, just ask, you know, start with an inquiry into your soul or whatever you're working with, and then just forget about it or write it as the first layer of your piece in your journal. But then just do whatever, even if it's coloring with crayons. Forget about the question, but usually by the end of the process, you've got some answers.
Yeah, that's awesome. So can you tell us a little bit more about the painting that's behind you there?
Yeah, you can see it. This is the one that I said is a new class that Shiloh and her husband are teaching. And normally we do female figures or our own versions of our sacred selves. This one, you can choose to put a face and a body on it, but it's really more about underneath these layers are, you know, my intention for turning some of my stories into medicine. And, you know, I've done a lot of work on a lot of my stories. These different white lines are what we call in intentional creativity, the lines of unavoidable tragedy. Because in our process, we sort of have our own views on manifestation, and that it's not, we energetically made all these things happen to us. Sometimes they're just things that happen in our lives that we had no control over. This bottom one has a lot more to do with world tragedy and what's going out in the field right now. And so this is at the very beginning stages of the painting. So I'm maybe only 2 or 3 layers into it.
How long does it usually?
Well, when I teach, we move through it in a day, so very quickly. And then you can go off and do more work on your painting. This one could take me, well, I'll definitely be working on it heavily the rest of the week, but new things will come up. Some paintings for me have taken 4 to 6 months. Some of them that are even hanging there, I don't consider complete. Every once in a while, I'll be working on one painting and the muse will say to me, oh, you know, a symbol or something came up, but it's not for this canvas, it's for that canvas. So I'll go and pull it off the wall and go add something to it.
That's awesome. Yeah, because we do continue to evolve every day. So that's really great that you're using that process in your own evolution. So do you have an offer that you would like to make to this audience?
I do, and it's actually so new that it hasn't been put out to the general public yet or automated. So, but it is ready for prime time. What I have is a 10 video series, which is a short intentional creativity process called Discover Your Gifts. And it's really about discovering what your internal gifts are, as well as the ones that wisdom you've received over the years or training you've had. But it's a real acknowledgement of getting quiet and discovering what your gifts are, and then how to claim them and share them, because the world desperately needs us all to share our gifts right now. And that, to learn that our very presence is the medicine. So it's a 10 video series. I'll have to send it off manually, but all I would ask is that folks go to my website, sign up for the newsletter, and I'll get the video series shipped off within the next couple of days.
Great. So I will get the information from you and we'll put it underneath the video so that people know where to go. And is there any last advice or anything that you'd like to say to the audience before we close the segment?
I think really what has helped me the most in my life is to know that underneath all the masks, which we need to walk in this world, we need to wear them. But underneath that is this sacred assignment that we were brought here on this planet, that this soul came into this body to achieve. It may or may not be achieved fully in this lifetime, but to, get quiet and really understand what your sacred assignment is, which is very different a lot of times than the work we do in the world. Often it's a one word sort of, it's much more simplistic, yet much more deep than our purpose, I think. And so to keep coming back to that, because sometimes the language changes. And then when we know what that is, we bring that in as the compass during, while we're wearing all these different masks.
Yeah, and it's like, in my book, I call it your divine truth. This is kind of your mission, and importance of really re-engaging with that. I totally agree, so that you're still in alignment with where your soul is trying to take you. Mm-hmm. So I love all that you're doing, and you and I will be collaborating in August, because you have invited me to bring some of my work there, and I'm excited for that. And we'll put all of your information underneath the video. Thank you so much for being on this segment today, and keep doing this amazing work, because I also believe that, we all have creativity within us that just wants to be expressed, and you don't have to be trained at anything. You just have to connect with that deeper part of you that wants to help you do that. So thank you for the work that you're doing. It is so important.
Thank you. And thank you for the work you're doing and for having me here today. It's been an honor.
Absolutely. So just reminding everybody that you are loved and you are loved. And I'll be back here next week on Tuesday. So have a blessed day. Thank you, Dina, and we'll be talking soon.
Thank you. I'm honored.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.